get out there, catch more fish.
Hey everyone, Mike here from BinyaOutDoors. Welcome to another live stream, another special edition. We have a guest on today. I'm going to have him introduce himself and then we'll get into the topic.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Matt. I'm a content creator living in Vermont, and I have a channel called VTTU where we do fishing and skiing and kind of outdoor content in general. And I'm here today to talk about lake trout fishing, which is my favorite thing to chase in Lake Champlain. And but maybe talk a little bit about what kind of fish grippers work, couple baits for them, and fishing out of a kayak or a fish finder, and any of the other stuff you want to ask about. So I'm not an expert. I've just caught a couple. And you can check out proof of this on my channel, VTTU.
We'll have a link down in the description to his channel too, guys. So part of the motivation for this, in case you're wondering why is the bass guy bringing on a trout guy, is I've started doing the Jigs and Bigs multi-species scavenger hunt series, and I've always failed to put a trout on the board. And I wanted to find someone that can help me catch trout, and it worked out that I have somebody in Vermont because, to be honest, Vermont is its own little subset, and there is a little bit of nuance to catching fish here that's a little bit different than a lot of other places. So I wanted to bring someone on that's what they enjoy. And honestly, I thought it would be a good way to just have a conversation that's a little bit different than what I normally do. So the first question I have for you, I'm going fishing this weekend, right? Will trout eat like a Ned rig? Like, would they eat that?
So one of the things that I have over here that I've caught a lot of fish with that's kind of similar is just like a 3/4 grub. So like a Ned rig, we're just talking about like a little stick bait without the freaking curly tail at that point, right?
Yeah. So the reason why I ask is because that's what I've seen a lot of, so it's funny how the worlds cross, right? Because I don't know if you've ever like bass fished, but like hair jigs, let's be honest, a smallmouth hair jig is a downsized trout jig. Like it basically is, an ounce lighter is pretty much what it is, because they create like 1/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce hair jigs, but it's just a smaller hook. But it's the same concept. It's just hair, most trout jigs are just longer. Um, let's be honest, a spinner bait is, you downsize that a little bit and you have a beetle spin, which you catch smaller fish on. There's a lot of, I know a lot of guys that jig spoons.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's a
when
lot
you're
of
talking
crossover.
about small baits, I think the biggest challenge you have at that point is the depth of water you're fishing in and how heavy the lure is.
Okay.
Because if you're only fishing in 10 or 15 feet of water, it probably doesn't matter very much. But if you're fishing in
Right.
40, 50, 70 feet of water and you're only fishing like a 1/2 ounce lure, it's going to take a while to get down there. Or if you're dealing with like some drift or something like that, that's going to impact that. So I'm fishing like usually at least an ounce. Sometimes if I'm in a kayak, up to 3 or 4 ounces if it's like a poor man's spot lock kind of situation.
Yeah.
But I don't see why the Ned rigs wouldn't work. I do think they like. So the Ned, you're talking about a Ned, we're just talking about a little stick bait with no tail or anything on it, right?
So yeah and no. So I actually, a lot of times with a Ned rig, a lot of times I throw a grub on it, and I actually throw, sometimes I have it's kind of like a mini zoom brush hog, which is basically got a 1/2 curly tail appendage on the back of it. And honestly, a lot of times with Ned, sometimes I even throw a small paddle tail swim bait, which definitely I know trout would be into. Because it's something where I've been trying to debate on whether I wanted the drop shot or Ned rig, and I know you can technically drop shot for trout, but the hook is so small that it's kind of hard to really use.
Yeah, I mean, with the lake trout and these type of baits, you're just trying to imitate their forage. You're trying to act like whatever bait fish they're chasing,
right?
And ideally, they are either getting caught at the bottom feeding, or they're getting caught like coming up or going down the water column.
Right.
So whatever you can do to reasonably imitate that, I don't think it has to be a tube or a Ned or whatever. They're kind of famous for being able to hit whatever. I personally want to try putting a piece of hot dog on like a jig head or something like this, just to say that I've done it, because I can. But I think smell, I think, also helps. I've had fish cough up a big alewife before,
Okay.
and chumming with that, or like tipping my bait with whatever they're actually chasing. If you're lucky enough to have it with you, or you have someone who can get preserved alewife, they're actually really good. I've had like the fishing kick up when someone has a little bit of that oil get in the water and stuff. So
Yeah.
I would say chumming is definitely another thing too. I mean,
Yeah.
like totally not related to the Ned rig, but
No, it makes sense. That's why I asked, because I've caught lake trout quite a bit, but it's all been like big boat trolling with downriggers, with spoons,
yeah,
I guess in a way the traditional way in Vermont, because that's how everybody kind of does it, is they get two rod holders out the back if they got a
yeah.
small boat with some sort of spoon and put it down on a downrigger
I've
and
I've
rod
only
back.
caught one lake trout with that method, but it's only because I've only till recently did I have like the small kayak style downrigger, and I kind of
Yep.
strapped it to the side of my boat. I ended up getting landlocked salmon and a lake trout the same day on kind of these like big alewife style spoons that were just kind of
Yep.
fluttering. But I am not as excited about just kind of aimlessly driving around and hoping for
Yeah.
fish.
Yep.
For the other thing I would say that's more important than the Ned rig versus tube is having a fish finder, because I have heard of people just dead sticking, waiting for something to come clobber their bait. And I have experienced that myself, but I do think being able to see them down there and knowing what you're looking for that's almost more important than the type of lure that you're dropping down.
That's a good question. So that kind of brings me to the next point. So this year, I don't know if you've seen the Lowrance hook reveal at all or anything about it.
Is it like that, like live scope stuff?
So what it is it's a Lowrance. It's actually a cheaper Lowrance fish finder, but what they did is they did a hybrid. So what they did is they do down imaging, but then they also have 2D built into it to mark fish. So you get structure with the down imaging. So the bottom is down imaging, and then they actually overlay on the same screen without having to do two different views,
It's
a
kind of neat.
2D. So, and that's the reason why I got that, is because of Champlain. Because I catch, and I'm not trying to brag, but like I catch pretty good sized largemouth. I have yet to catch a fucking smallmouth on Lake Champlain. And I'm very ashamed to say that, because that's like the freaking bucket list
I'll
like,
say I haven't caught a nice smallie on Champlain, and I've seen some of the guys on Fishing 802 holding up freaking
yeah.
footballs by the jaw. There are some trophy fish out there for
And it's
those who know how to
aggravating
get
to me
out on the
because I'm
lake.
looking
Yeah.
at it. I'm looking at this like I live here and I can't do this, and it's irritating me. So I was trying to figure out how to fish offshore, because honestly, Champlain makes up, for those of you who don't know, the shoreline of Champlain is pretty much milfoil by midsummer. There's not clean shoreline anywhere. There's not rocks, bluffs, all that. It's milfoil. It's pretty much how it works. So you have to go offshore to find that clean water that smallmouth really like. That's why when you watch the Bassmasters, most of them are caught out drop shotting. That's because now I will say, the further north you go, you will find more of that type of structure. But
Hmm.
in our area where we are, that's not a thing. And actually, the further south you go, the more swampy it gets. So I've been trying to figure out how to fish offshore. So that's why I bought that fish finder, was because I feel like I'm going to be able to identify schools of fish easier, because I'll be able to see the overlay and not have. Honestly, I had a Striker 4, which is an awesome fish finder. No disparaging it, but it doesn't do really well like lake trout on the bottom. There's no way to tell whether that's a lake trout or a rock pile. Like,
So
it's not
it's
easy.
interesting you say that. One of the suggestions I have for folks that have fish finders is to use them often enough to get an idea of what interference or particulate in the water looks like. Because a lot of times, I would say more than half the times I've fished, I've struggled with the fish finder, not because it didn't work right, but because there's like literally particulate and
Yeah.
stuff in the water that affects the return. So it may not look like that Hollywood level like graph picture.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to dial it in just enough to see the fish at all. Or one of the tricks I've learned is to put I have the Striker 4. I'll put it in split frequency mode, because
Yep.
sometimes if I'm not sure which one is working best, being
Yep.
able to look at them side by side kind of takes that scientific. Wait, which one should I don't know, put them both on. Oh yeah, oh that's what I want. Like you will
Yep.
see it night and day. And I've had times where it's the difference between seeing fish or not seeing fish. And that, I guess so, understanding what frequencies to use and then knowing what it looks like when there's particulate in the water and how like being able to see through the fuzz, I guess,
Yep.
is like it's an acquired taste. It's hard to teach without a bunch of video. It's something I've struggled to record on my channel as well, and I'm trying to do a better job of getting footage where I have a camera pointed at the finder so I can overlay it, because it's one of the things I wish I could add to my content.
For those of you who don't create content, here's what happens. You have a fisheye lens, and you have the goddamn sun, and you have a reflective monitor. So you end up recording yourself trying to record the screen in a wide angle, because it does some weird freaking, it's almost impossible to, you basically would have to like almost take like a black sheet and throw it over your camera and like
Yeah,
not know what you're
you can put a little block over it. Some
Yeah.
people have like a secondary camera they point at it.
It's not easy. I've tried it. I've tried to be like, look at this school of fish, and it's just like it's me looking back at the monitor. Like it doesn't.
There's one of my episodes where I try to set it up, and I'm like, oh, this is awful. I've given up on
Yeah. So the question I have, speaking of like, so fish finders, so like bass, for example, bass load up on ledges, rock piles. Do trout have the same, lake trout, any trout really, but do they have the same mentality? Like, are they trying to find like gullies and channel, or are they just gonna, because I know when I've been in the big boat, to be honest, most of the time when I'm doing lake trout fishing, it's May, June, and they're usually suspending at that point. They're not really truly on the bottom, so I've never really seen them relate to anything.
For me, it's a like situational thing. I can't say the time of the year whether they're going to be at the bottom or whether they're going to be mid column. But as you're going around, you're gonna see marks, and they're not like hanging out in one place. That's the one piece of advice I can give there, is that they're kind of moving around. And kayak is kind of nice for like slowly going over an area looking for them. Whereas if you're in a boat, you're just like cranking it up to 30 and cruising out to a spot. So there's pros and cons to either. But for the fishing that I've done, I'm usually looking for a particular like depth, because I either know the temperature, the thermocline is there, or I might find some structure that I want to fish near. But it's rarely shallower than 40 feet. But I'm only talking about jigging for them. You can target them in the shallows other times a year, but I've had the best success, and I personally just enjoy jigging for them. It's just more fun.
Yeah, I know when we've done the big boat, we've caught them a lot of times. Like, again, we're fishing like, I usually, so what happens is at the beginning of the year, my brother is really big into, he has like a 20-foot StarCraft.
Nice.
And he likes to do the whole like trolling deal, you know. We're usually trying to catch salmon, honestly. But when we find out that they're not biting, we just send the riggers down and see if we can find some trout. But a lot of times I know we've definitely caught lake trout with like the planer boards up against the bluff walls that we were trying to get salmon with, but we're putting them out there. So I know they're shallow because we've definitely caught them out there too. And it's what's crazy about it. I don't know if you have the same opinion, and you're not fishing. Like, so we fish a lot out of Converse when we're doing the big boat, because it's like, let's be honest, that's kind of trout heaven out there. But I feel like there's a lot of lake trout. Like, I don't know, like if it's just because we're fishing in the area and we know roughly where to be, but I feel like in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been like a major uptick in like numbers.
There was an article recently about how they're not stocking them as much anymore because they're naturally reproducing. So that's awesome. That's actually a really good segue to one of the other things I wanted to talk about, which is what kind of fish grippers should you use for lake trout and which ones should you not use. This is something I've kind of learned as I went. Ideally, if you can, it's nice if you can gill them. Like that's kind of the easiest. I have these two here. These ones you'll see me use a lot in the videos. I like these a lot. The only problem with these is when they snap shut, they put a lot of force between these two, and you can literally crush the cartilage of the fish's mouth. So you want to make sure you get it like over the lip, sort of, if you're going to close it. Or sometimes I don't totally close it. The ones I'll say not explicitly, do not use these for lake trout.
Those, don't use them for bass either.
Yeah, these I have had lakers when they do their thrashing, like they will mess themselves up with these. It'll be easy for you, the fisherman, to hold them. This is like a convenience thing where to help, more of those fish get big and stay big. The other thing I would also recommend, I got here my handy net. This is the one that I use for my kayak. It's pretty large, and I think unhooking them in the net if you can. It's not really feasible for all boats, but especially for kayaks. Unhooking them in the net causes them to freak out a little bit less, and I like just trying to just unhook them in there.
I do the same thing. So for bass tournaments, the way it works is you put the fish on a measuring board, and you have to get all that ready. You have to get your phone out. You have to get the measuring board ready. So I do the same thing. I unhook them. I put them in the net. The net keeps them. They can get in the water. They can swim. They can breathe. And they're less stressed out than laying on the deck of my kayak while I'm trying to get my measuring board ready. They're out of my way. I'm out of their way. And I will reiterate, those metal lip grippers need to be made illegal. I have destroyed pike mells.
I don't know if they need to make them illegal, but they're good for saltwater fish. There's a whole market in place where they're fine. It's just that if someone doesn't know, and it's an easy, genuine mistake to make where you're just like, oh, let me grab the fish grippers that I was, nailing stripers with. It's you need something big and heavy. These are big fish. They're 8-10 pounds each. So you need something substantial to hold on to them with.
I've literally ruined bass with those. I had a scale that had one of those on it, and I was trying to weigh the fish, and he was swinging, and it was wearing a freaking hole under his jaw. And I had the same thing happen to a pike where it literally cut a hole in his jaw, and I was like, I don't and I have the same plastic style ones that I use. I really don't use them much for bass. And actually that little bungee cord thing, that's an important feature, guys, because it actually allows you to wrap it around there to keep it locked. Because if you're trying to hold a fish, sometimes they will.
Oh, I've never done that before. That's interesting.
Yeah. So what that will do is what I used to do before I had a net. So if you forget your net, you can actually do that and then tie it to a rope and throw them over to revive them. So we do it with king salmon on Lake Ontario when we catch them, because we don't keep all of the king salmon that we catch. So what we'll do is we actually have one of those tied to paracord off the rod holder, and we actually will take the fish, clip them in the mouth, drop them off the side, and drag them for a little bit to let them get revived, because it gets the oxygen in their lungs. It helps them to stay underwater. And lake trout, especially if you're trying to revive them, they're slimy. They're hard to hang on to. You're not gonna palm the belly of that fish to hold them in the water. It's gonna slip out of your hand. So if you get one that you beat the crap out of, you clip that on there and then you hold them in the water to help revive them a little bit.
One thing I'll say about holding on to the lake trout is a good grab on their tail is a very effective way to control. That's one of the next to their head, the strongest part of the fish. So if you can get under their head and get them by the tail, kind of under the gill and the tail, you have a really strong grip on the fish, and even if they are wiggling, you have a pretty good chance of holding on to them.
Yeah, because to be honest, I don't use the lip grippers a lot for bass, because
you want that rough thumb is a badge of honor at the end of a good day of fishing.
Yeah. But pike, I use those lip grippers exclusively, dude. I don't screw around.
Yeah, I'm not messing with the gator teeth. No, thank you.
Well, what's funny about it too is I didn't know this until probably about halfway through last year, but pike actually have an enzyme in their mouth that prevents clotting.
Huh.
That's why, have you ever noticed if you get nicked by a pike, it bleeds like crazy? It's because they literally have an enzyme in their mouth that's an anticoagulant. So it's to help them.
Murderers.
It's to help them kill their prey, because if they attack something, it's going to bleed out because they have that in their mouth. but it's also has that same effect on humans too. And
Yeah.
I've gotten shredded. Like you try to lip them and you'll get shredded. They're aggressive and they
I
attack.
have not been I have not experienced that yet, so I feel pretty lucky on that one.
Don't. It's a bad idea, especially if you have. I literally have. I don't have the red one you have, but I have like the Rapala black and white one,
Yeah.
and I have it literally tied on like a retractable thing right to my seat in my kayak
That's smart.
because I. So one of the biggest pike I've ever caught, I lost because I clipped the gripper onto its mouth to pull it out of the water, and he pulled that out of my hand, which that was one that was actually connected to a scale. And I had a 13 fishing square bill. So it was like a $40 fish because he pulled the lip gripper out of my hand. He broke my line at the same time, thrashing his teeth, and swam down. And I could see my lip gripper and
That's
my
terrible.
bait, and it was just going with him. So I actually tied mine onto like it's actually like a cable retriever. So
It's
that
a good
way, if
idea.
they do
Yeah,
rip it out of my
I'm
hand, they
pretty
aren't
sure
going
this
too
one
far.
floats. That's one of the reasons I feel
Yep,
comfortable taking
nice.
this out in the kayak with me.
Yep, that's a
It's
good
at this
idea.
point, it's more of a peace of mind because I've been practicing the gill thing, but I have to be honest, I'm still not good at it, and
It's hard with
sometimes I'm just like I can't get it, and I still have to use the
I
gripper.
do the same thing with salmon on Lake Ontario, so it's the same concept, but it's like their gills are smaller. Like it's hard. Their mouths are smaller. Like it's not
If you
easy to get a
haven't
hold of.
done it, it's just sticking your human fingers up the fish,
You
and
can,
it doesn't feel normal or right. And
yeah.
even when you do it right, it's like until you have a
It
handle
actually
for it,
feels like you're gonna rip them off.
it
If
does.
you
You're like,
hold
oh
them
no,
up
this
by that,
thing's
you like,
head's gonna pop off.
yeah, you feel like you're gonna rip its face apart. It's
Yeah,
like really odd, yeah.
that's how you know you're doing it right.
And what's funny about it is it's not just trout. Like and trout are like the thing about lake trout too, or even brook trout too. Like they're very sensitive fish. Like their mouths are wicked soft
Well,
compared to like a
the
bass or
lake
other
trout
fish.
are actually a species of char. What you're talking about, the like browns,
Yeah,
rainbows, those guys, they're a different species, and their faces are like made of jello,
yeah,
comparatively speaking.
yeah.
The lake trout are actually pretty like hard and
True,
bony-ish.
yeah,
They're you can still grab them around the face, but their jaw mouth line is not unlike the pike. It's like
true,
toothy. You could really fuck your hands up
yeah,
if you reach in there without the gripper or something.
right. Yeah, because I know I actually caught a pretty decent sized brown on a swim bait on Lake Dunmore one day, and
Nice.
dude, by the time I got that, of course it's a fucking 4 swim bait hook. So it's not, I'm not fishing. I wasn't fishing for trout. So like I was using it as a pretty good size hook. And when I finally got that hook out of his mouth there, I mean, I ripped him up really. I felt really bad because he was bleeding. And I was like,
Yeah.
if you actually watch the video, I'm like, look, guys, I caught a trout. I took a picture on the deck and then I'm putting him right back in the water because I'm like, I don't want to kill this thing and
Yeah, I
he's
got a couple of
bleeding.
those. Hey, look, I caught this. He's bleeding.
Yeah. It's funny because like as a hunter and someone who's definitely killed animals in my life, like it's weird when you get a fish in the boat, you're like you want to just like get it. You don't want to harm it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
when they start bleeding and you start realizing that you're ripping them up, you're just like, you know what? Let me get you back in
Yeah.
the water as quickly as I can.
I've had a few straight up crime scenes on the ice where I'm just
Oh,
not as attentive with my hook set and they eat it a
yeah.
little bit. And if it gets in their gills, that's actually another thing. Some of the baits that I use, I've tried to use single hooks instead of trebles
Yep.
because it's just a little bit better for the fish. I'm okay
Yep.
losing a fish or two if it's an easier unhook. I don't think trebles are bad by any measure, but it is something I've experimented with.
Trebles are so in the bass industry, trebles are used a lot and a lot of different baits. And they have the ability to go everywhere but the fucking mouth. Like they just do. Like I don't understand. Like I don't know how many times. And what's funny is, actually in the tournament world, that's an illegal fish.
Oh, if you catch one on a treble hook?
So like in the big bass boat
Interesting.
world, and actually in some kayak series, you have to have a hook in the mouth. Now, if you got one in the mouth and you get one on their side of their face or
Oh, so
something,
like no foul
that's
hooks or
fine.
anything like
But if it's
yeah.
not in the mouth, at least with one of the hooks, it's considered
Yeah.
a foul hook, and you didn't legally catch that fish, so
Yeah,
that
it kind
fish
of makes
doesn't count
sense.
for a tournament.
I have, fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't had to deal with any tournament rules. So I would like to enter tournaments as long as I don't have to kill fish to do it. That's kind of a turnoff with me for some of the ice fishing stuff I've seen up
So
here.
me and you, I plan on, like I said before in messages, I plan on fishing with you. You should definitely check out that Jigs and Bigs multi-species. So it's like $30 to enter. It's a month-long tournament. It's all online, national tournament, so it's anywhere across the country, and you can fish anywhere you want, right? So what it is you get a point for every species that you catch. So there's a list of species that are on the board, and you get a point for each one. And for you, there's any 5, right? So you can put any of the 5 fish in there. So for most guys that are bass fishermen, we throw pike in there because those are the longest we catch. But I've seen some of the lake trout you catch. If you were to put 5 of them in there, you're gonna
What was it
probably
called again?
it's it's Jigs and Bigs. It's called the multi-species tournament, but they're rebranding it as a scavenger hunt. So what's cool about that tournament series is like you the way it works is, so say you have bluegill, perch, bass. So you have bluegill, perch, smallmouth, largemouth, pike, pickerel, trout, drum. All those species are in there. So you get a point for every species that you catch a fish in, that you just enter a fish. Now there is, like, I think bluegill, they added an 8-inch minimum, which, believe it or not, is really
Nice.
hard to accomplish.
Dude, a big bluegill is like I got a 9-incher or so in Mallett's Bay this year, and that
Yep.
was one of the, because I wasn't fishing for Lakers, that was like one of the best fish I got all season.
Right, and rock bass, I think, is another one that's in there.
Nice, they're
So you
fun
get a
too.
point for each one, right? And then if you have the biggest fish in that category, you get 2 points. But there's only one biggest fish. So say I
Yeah.
have the biggest lake trout at 15 inches, right? You catch a 16-incher, you take away my point, so I go down to 1 point and you go up to
All right.
2. So what's cool about it is that literally what's bad about it, I'll start with this. What's bad about it is you will find yourself sitting on shore with a box of night crawlers trying to catch a goddamn yellow perch because you don't have one yet. And
Oh
you'll
man.
obsess about catching a crappie when you never would have thought of it before. But if you enjoy just fishing, what's cool about it is that bycatch becomes useful. So like if you're out there fishing for lake trout and you pull up a white perch, that's a perch category.
I have snagged perch with my vertical tube jig before, so that's a
Yeah.
real thing. Hey man, can
Yeah.
I take a quick bathroom break? Is that all right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. 1 sec.
Might as well take this second to see if anybody has any questions. I see Arthur's in the chat as always, my number one fan, I think. Arthur, have you been out fishing yet this year? While we're taking a slight intermission. And guys, if you haven't checked out that tournament series, I know I did a show about it with Bobby Roast Beef from Jigs and Pigs. I highly recommend checking that out if you haven't done any kayak tournament series. It is a very fun way to get into tournament series in general. You don't have to be in a kayak. You can be on the bank. You can fish from a boat. It does not matter how you catch the fish, but I highly recommend that because it's a great way to practice, have a little bit of competition in your life. And that's actually why I'm having this live stream, is because I want to learn how to catch trout a lot better. So if you guys haven't checked that out, definitely do that. But yeah,
Awesome. Thank
basically,
you.
like I was saying about that tournament series, dude, is what's cool about it is all that bycatch is useful.
Yeah.
One of the funniest things that I had happen to me. So I was in, well, you probably are familiar with. I was fishing Lake Iroquois. So I was fishing there, and I needed a yellow perch, or perch in general. They have perch category, right? So I needed a perch to get an extra point. So I literally brought night crawlers. Couldn't catch a goddamn perch on night crawler and a bobber. Like, how does that happen, right? So I said, screw it. So I got out some small MEP spinners because those always work for catching everything, you know? And I ended up finally catching a perch. And as I was taking him off the hook, he went under my seat in my kayak. So I'm like, how the hell am I going to get this thing out of here? So literally in the video, I'm hoofing it to shore, slide into shore. Now there's 5 people at the boat ramp fishing for bass. and I come flying in, pull my drive, sliding up the ramp, jump out, flip my seat up, grab this fucking 6-inch yellow perch, throw a measuring board down on the boat ramp, holding this measuring board, holding the fish, and take a photo. And I'm getting the funniest fucking looks from the people on the shore, to the point where I stopped and went, okay, I have to explain this.
He was really proud of this perch. It's a nice perch, guys.
And keep in mind, I'm pulling in. I've got fucking 9 rods and a rod holder, a kayak with lights, 2 sets of cameras. I'm wearing
You
all
look like
kinds
the
of
guy who should be pulling the 8-pound bass up.
Yeah, like I look like a fucking Bassmasters episode, and I'm freaking out about the 7-inch perch that I'm throwing on the measuring board. And that is the best introduction I can give you to this tournament series. Is that's how excited you get about dumb crap like that.
Nice.
And what's cool about it is it's $30 to enter. It's not like $100, and they do prizes for multiple categories. They actually do 2 different tournament series. So they have this series called the Chronic Trips, which involves saltwater. So they allow the saltwater guys to participate. I don't do that one because I can't compete with a tuna and a shark and a redfish. Like, there's not
the redfish are awesome. They're worth the travel. I can tell you on that. I've had the good fortune of catching some real nice ones.
They're a bucket list for sure.
It's awesome.
I was talking with Nate Shagnon. Another species bucket list for me is I was talking with Nate Shagnon from Mass, and I'm gonna go out to the Cape when the stripers run, and he's got a spot that he can catch stripers from kayaks. Dude,
those guys also are delicious. I had a friend of mine got a piece of striped bass. I'd never eaten it before, so I was like, whatever, and he ended up giving it to me so he wasn't wasting it.
Dude,
and next to like a black sea bass or like a nice flounder, like they are really tasty.
They remind me a lot of like haddock.
Yeah,
they have that flakiness, and like it's, dude, that's the only. I can't say that. This year, I have a coworker who insists that I need to eat a bass. So I'm going to eat a bass this year.
Like a largemouth bass?
Like a largemouth bass.
I'm conflicted on that one. I don't know. I feel that's how I feel about lake trout. Because I like fishing for them, I want to try eating one, but I don't feel that way about the largemouth.
I don't, but so one of the things I'm doing this year is I'm doing a camp out on Chittenden Reservoir.
Nice.
So some of the guys from that tournament, so Nate Shagnon, Bobby Roast Beef, and I think Becca from Fishing with Becca might come too. So I want to do like an actual, like, because around that's all state land, so you can camp on the state land around the reservoir. So what I want to do is go out there during one of the tournaments while we're all competing, because we're all entered into that tournament, and kind of like fish, because there they have walleye, they have trout, they have brook trout, they have smallmouth and largemouth in there. So I want to try to like catch a decent, like, I'm not gonna cook a 5-pounder, but if I catch like a 12 to 16, then I will throw that out and just try to do a catch and cook for that, that whole camping experience. But
I think it's worth the experiment. I'm also very excited about doing some camping and fishing this summer. Shout out to my buddies over at the Saratoga Bass Fishing Channel, Josh and Hunter. I'm excited to make a little content with you guys, and we've been thinking about a couple different places. Obviously, they're on the New York side, so they've suggested stuff like Valcour Island. I'm pitching Waterbury Reservoir. That's it. Like, I really want to do the remote campsites because I think it'll be fun to like paddle out there. And we have a group of us. You take the firewood, I'll take the this, that. We figure it out. We'll see what happens.
That's another place I didn't think about. That would be a good place to do. That's a good point too.
So the Waterbury Reservoir does not have any lake trout in it, but they do have brown trout, and they have
rainbows too, right? I think they
I have not caught one yet. Another shout out to my buddy Kent. We were there fishing this winter, and he's caught some rainbows and browns and stuff near the dam access. We were setting up some tip ups, and I just haven't gotten one yet, but I've caught some nice smallies in I know trolling for bass is kind of like ooh, but I just like catching fish, and we were up towards the Little River part of it, and my wife and I were trolling around with some crankbaits that were diving between 15 and 20, kind of, and this is one patch. We floated over it 3 or 4 times and got a couple real nice ones. That was
you want to hear bass fishing sacrilege? One of my dad's favorite ways of catching bass is to troll a jerkbait, which is really a walleye technique.
So I'm ignorant to this one. What is sacrilege about that? I truly don't get it.
So a jerkbait is literally meant to be a stationary suspending bait. So the idea behind the jerkbait is you throw it out and twitch it. So he literally throws out like Rapalas and just trolls with them. And he'll pull bass in. Like, the thing is he's a salmon fisherman at heart. So this dude trolls Senkos and like everything. Like, if he could troll it, like the first time we ever took our kayaks out on the water. So I have the Old Town Topwater, and we it was around this time of year we went out of Converse. The first time we ever fished out of these things, we went in March to Converse Bay.
Converse is a nice place to take the kayak out because there's like a little bit of a, I don't know, there's a point that extends the north part of Converse where if the wind sucks and you're in a kayak, you know that you can't go out, but it's not too bad. If you cross that threshold, you start getting white caps over the front. But it's one, I will say, if you do want to try kayak fishing, and Lake Champlain, Converse isn't bad for that reason. It's a bit of a paddle, but it's not too bad.
So just to give you an idea, I'm sitting there tooling around, all mooring buoys, thinking that there's some bass in there. I'm checking out that bay on the other side, and I look out, and my dad is fucking headed towards sloop in his kayak. First time he's ever been in this thing, and he's headed. But I call him on my phone, and I'm like, "Hey, where are you going?" He's like, "I'm gonna go see if I can troll for some salmon." And I'm like,
turns out you can.
You can, yeah, it works. But it's just funny. Like that's actually one of the reasons why I'm going where I'm going tomorrow. So I jerry rigged a motor mount for my kayak.
Nice.
So the Old Town has a power pole mount on the back. They built in like a place, and there's actually like a reinforced spot. So what my dad did is he basically took a piece of plastic and figured out the pattern for the holes, figured out the thread size and the bolt size that comes with it, and got longer version.
Nice.
So we basically are mounting a transom mount for a trolling motor back there. So I'm testing it out. So we're going out of Fort Cassin because we can always fish the creek if it gets rough.
Sweet.
But at the same time, if I want to try to test out the kayak more, I could just run up to Converse, because like you said, the thing about Converse is there's a high mountain range on the northern side, there's a high mountain range on the southern side, and there's literally an island in the middle. So it's like the perfect windbreak for every direction, really. So you pretty much don't get, if it gets rough in there, it's really bad on the main lake.
Yeah, I mean, there's no substitute for checking the wind forecast before you go out, but the next best thing is a protected bay like that. I would agree.
So it's not a bad place to like try out a trolling motor, because I can launch
definitely
it and tour around where the mooring buoys are and not have to worry about.
Another thing that's kind of close to that is the breakwater. Am I saying it right? In downtown Burlington.
Yeah.
That also has another kind of protective nature to it. I've actually caught a couple bass like around the jetty there. So if you want to, like, you're not sure if you want to go lake trout fishing in Burlington Bay, just paddle out, see how it feels by the lighthouse before you go further out, and make sure you have a friend with you, or at the very least the life jacket, whistle, and all that stuff.
Now I will say, I just said I'm going fishing this weekend. At the same time, don't go fucking fishing this weekend. Don't be stupid like me. I really want to get content, and I really want to try.
You have a dry suit?
I don't actually have a dry suit. I need one, but
that's the only reason I'm not taking my kayak out this weekend. So be very careful. We're definitely make smart choices. We are in the danger zone for falling in and hypothermia and stuff like that. So
yeah, I'm going.
You're a big boy. You can make smart choices. I trust you.
Yeah, that's actually part of why I'm going out of Fort Cassin, because if I get to the mouth, I don't know if you've launched out of there, but like it's not very far to the main lake, and if I get out there and I look and it's wavy, I'm gonna turn around and head back up the
As
creek.
long as
So
you're willing to turn back when you get there, I think people who
yeah,
get fixated on like I gotta go, this is my only weekend to go. Like personally, I'm gonna try and drive up into the Northeast Kingdom on Saturday because it's my only chance to try and do a little ice fishing. We're gonna see
yep.
if any's left, but I'm gonna drive up there with the knowledge that I might spud the ice and be like, this is unsafe. I drove 2 hours for nothing.
So can we just talk about for a second as a trout fisherman too? How fucked up has this year been that you can go fish the Northeast Kingdom and ice fish, and I can go to Ferrisburg and open water fish in the same goddamn day?
I my
What?
the two episodes I released like the best day ever. It's open water. It hasn't even iced in at all
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah.
It has been a difficult season for the ice fishing content creator.
It's my fault. It's my fault, by the way.
What did you do?
It's absolutely my fault. So what I said is last year, so the previous year, I actually worked all through the fall. I got a second job and worked at a restaurant. So I didn't care that I couldn't fish because I was working every weekend. This coming winter, this one that we just got out of, I said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit more ice fishing this year to try to make some ice fishing content to bridge the gap between the fall content. Because my last fishing content or fishing, stuff was in Rhode Island Halloween weekend. So I did a tournament in Rhode Island and I was there for that
Nice.
weekend, which was cool, but it was cold as shit. And I was camping in a tent because I didn't have a better setup and I kind of planned it out, but basically I went down there on Friday to pre-fish. I fished the 2 bodies of water Friday, Saturday. The tournament was Sunday and then I came home. But I was sleeping in a 4-man tent with like 7 blankets. I've since
You made
learned.
it work.
So I've since learned that I was stupid. So I've been watching. I've been watching. If you guys haven't checked it out, if you want to do any truck camping, there's a lot of like YouTubers out there doing it. But Fishing with Becca, she's from Rhode Island, and she actually, I didn't even know they made these. So they make a 12-volt heated blanket.
Oh yeah.
I had no idea that was a thing. If I'd known that was a thing, I have a marine battery. Charge that up, run an inverter, run it right off of the battery.
Yeah.
Like I could have easily been like, oh, just throw this on it. So I actually bought for future trips. I actually bought one of those air mattresses that goes on the back seat of your vehicle and like has that thing that sits in
Yeah,
the
I know
leg
what you mean. We
area.
got one of those.
So I'm gonna do that because I have an F-150. I have the super cab, so it's a small area. But
Yeah.
if I lay at an angle, I think I can almost stretch out like enough.
Nice.
And now you kind of sleep with my knees bent anyways. And it's gonna be a hell of a lot warmer in the cab of that
Yeah, and
truck
it'll
than in a
save you the
tent
time of
underneath.
not having to pitch a fucking tent after a day of fishing and you're exhausted and
Well,
like yeah.
so I'm doing tournaments in New Hampshire this year.
Nice, man.
So I'm gonna be driving down and doing the Slay Nation tournaments in New Hampshire. Some of these tournaments are 3.5 hour drive from my house.
How bad do you want it?
So yeah, so what I'm going to do is get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and drive down because the boat, the way they do, I don't know if you've ever like seen how they do kayak tournaments. It's very similar to like bass boats, but you get there, you check in with your tournament director, and then you basically can launch your kayak, but you can't leave the ramp until lines in basically. So a lot of times they'll give you like a little bit of a time, like if it's 10 minutes before and everybody's checked in, then they'll say, okay, go ahead, and everybody paddles in, but you can't cast till specific lines in time. Then there's a lines out time, which I believe is 2 o'clock in this series, and then you go to the weigh-in and you basically go through and you win your prizes, and depending on how many people place, how many people enter, they place up to 3, and then anybody below that actually wins prizes for a drawing. So you have a chance at money, and I'm just stupid competitive, so I want to try to win AOI my first time just because that's how I operate my brain. But I know after driving from 2 o'clock in the morning and fishing all day, I'm probably going to want to rest before coming home. So I've got that mattress because worst case scenario, I take a 4-hour nap at the
Yeah,
boat ramp
absolutely.
before coming home. Or if my wife doesn't have to work that weekend, maybe I'll just sleep there and pre-fish the next lake before I head home, something like that. So that's why I bought that, because it can just sit in my truck. I'm just going to slide it up under my
I'm a
seat.
huge fan of car naps. On a long trip like that, if you're feeling tired, it is a great idea to pull over, set a 30-minute timer, and like
Yep.
that's way better than passing out behind the wheel. So yeah.
So I'm thinking that what I may do is do that, figure out a system to lock my kayak to my trailer so somebody doesn't like take it off while I'm passed out in the back seat of my truck. But I'm thinking that's what I'm going to try to do if I need to, because that's if anybody who hasn't fished for an extended amount of time in a serious capacity, it is a lot more tiring and exhausting than you might think. And a pedal drive kayak, you don't realize how much you pedal. You want to do an experiment, put one of those freaking step trackers on your ankle and watch how many steps you did that day.
Oh yeah.
It is insane.
So I'm a very lazy person. I'm working on adding a motor to my. I have a sit-in kayak, but I'm still putting a motor on it because it's very stable. It's a bona fide EX123.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually have a very inexpensive motor. The hard part is fabricating like a bracket for the back of it, where if you hit something, it can pop up and stuff. But the 3D printer, that's where that thing's coming in. So I'm designing some stuff, and when it's actually functional, I'll have some videos. But I like to save my energy for the fish. That's why I don't feel bad at all about, especially if it's like an all day thing. If it's just like going out for a little bit, I'll paddle because it's like not that long. And especially like I was watching my my first kayak Laker video, and like I was coming back at like 8:30 at night. So not only are you worked from paddling out there and fighting the fish, then you're dark out. I would highly recommend anybody who's considering fishing for lake trout, bring a headlamp, because if it gets like at the end of the day and you're coming back, really cheap piece of gear and great to have.
I actually recommend. So it's funny is this was actually sent to me by a company to review.
Nice.
I'm actually going to be giving one of these away once I've been able to prove if it's good or not. I recommend not only a headlamp, get a rechargeable headlamp. And the reason why I recommend this is if you bring a battery bank with you, buy a cheap one at Walmart and bring a rechargeable headlamp, because if for some reason, and it will happen, and actually this one's kind of cool because it lets you lock the buttons, but for some reason, when you put these in a backpack, the gremlins turn them on. And they are on in your backpack all freaking day. And you go to put it on your head to use it to get home, and you turn it on, and it turns on, and then instantly dies. So with the rechargeable ones, if you have the cable with you, you can plug them into a battery bank, and they'll run directly off the battery bank.
Yeah, at least you can recover from that.
So you don't have to carry batteries in your kayak that way. You just have your battery bank that you're going to be using to charge your phone anyways. I highly recommend that because I've had that happen to me a lot. And it really sucks because it's dark on the water. Like, it sounds really silly, but it is like you have no idea where shore is when you're on the water in the dark.
Yeah, even if you're familiar with it, and I've had similar experiences ice fishing where I'm kind of out at night and it gets really scary really fast. So I think the best thing is to not fish alone. I wish I didn't do that as much as I have, but the next best thing is making sure you have a light or a headlamp, or I have a 12-volt light. It's like a navigation light, and I have it on the end of a painting pole. So it's like my wizard staff. And that thing is, I put that on my ice fishing sled, and it's like a 360-degree light around me. So I'm hoping I can mount it on my kayak and have that. Just having a light like above you so everything is lit is really nice.
And I recommend if you're going to do that, guys, so one thing you can do to help, I don't know what yours is, but a lot of times if you get like a colored LED style, like green or red, it won't attract bugs. Because I will tell you, the one mistake you'll make is use a white LED light, and you are going to be all day.
That you do need to be careful with the green and red because those have significance for maritime navigation. Those are supposed to be on certain parts of your boat.
Right.
But I've actually thought about this. My boat is green, and I want to put white LEDs inside of it, and I realized I'm going to be a giant green light.
Yep.
So,
dude, it's fine. I've done it. It actually so what's really cool about it is people will think you're an alien, and it's really fun.
Oh, there's this YouTuber. Her name is Zyla Foxland, and she made a clear kayak and put RGB LEDs in it. You want to
That's
see
cool.
an alien kayak? It is the most
That's
incredible thing
awesome.
I've ever seen. It's
Yeah. The
spectacular.
first time I ever, so my previous setup that I had, I put 3 green courtesy LEDs on my rod holders in the back of my crate. So I have
Nice.
2 kind of facing outward, so they kind of go around me, and then 1 for my tackle. And I do it more for just so you can see me,
Yeah.
honestly. I'm probably gonna put red ones on the front just to make it legal to an extent. Um,
Yeah, at least you're
because
balancing it out.
technically you have green and red like you're
Well,
supposed
the
to,
whole
but
goal with the
just have
red and
bright
green is
flaps.
so they
But
know which way you're going.
right.
So,
But the first time I ever did it, I turned them on, and these things were freaking like this is like a room LED, and I wrapped them around each rod holder. So I have
oh
8
wow,
rod holders with these things like wrapped around all the way around.
yeah.
And no joke, I turned them on when I was fishing in this little bay, and I heard somebody go, "What the fuck is that?" And then it was like, honey, what the fuck is that? And I just heard like a bunch, like literally, I had a group of people standing on their porch trying to figure out what this weird glowy shit was out in the middle of the lake. But
Well,
I
I
had,
look forward to confusing people this summer. I'm gonna be once the temperatures are safe. I'm gonna be out there bobbing around that green thing. You can't miss me.
yeah, it's what I do a lot of times is it's actually really weird. Is I have a headlamp that has black light on it,
Hmm.
and a black light actually works really good to be able to see, but doesn't screw with your night vision.
Huh. Interesting.
So now, granted, you're not going to be able to pick lure color with that because you're not going to know what color you're actually. The cool thing is if you got UV stuff, it's going to charge that
I was
stuff.
just gonna say, if your headlamp is charging everything up, that you're like 2 for 1 right there.
Yeah, so it is kind of cool. So I actually bought it's a Swiss Tech headlamp that I bought at Walmart, and it
Huh.
has like a focusable
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's
nice.
fully rechargeable. It's got a USB plug in the back of it, and it has a red light on the back, and then the light in the front, and it has like red light, black light, and then regular white LED mode. But it's kind of like a spotlight and flood, and it's
Yeah,
really nice for when you're trying to tie because you can turn it down, turn that black light on, and you can tie knots by that
yeah,
because your
definitely.
light, your line glows like the fluorocarbon and all that line. It reflects that black light really well, so you can see it. But if you want to know whether you're putting a red or a black or a green or a yellow bait on, you can't use it because everything's all screwed up because of the light. But it does work really good for not screwing with your night vision because that's the one thing that always sucks is you turn the headlamp on and then you're like, I can't tell where I am right now.
Yeah, man.
But now, do trout? Now that's a good question that I never thought of. Is do trout? I've never fished for trout like after dark. Like, do they become more active after dark, or are they kind of like bass where they kind of shut down
I
after the sun
haven't
hits
caught
down?
any at night, but if you go on YouTube, you see some of these ice fishing guys. They definitely get them in the evening.
Okay.
I've had good. I haven't had a ton of like really early action. It usually starts like 10 to noon,
Yep.
afternoon, sometimes 2 or 3. So as a late riser, like Lake Trout is a good
Yep.
fish for me on that one.
Well, that's the thing. Is like for me, like tomorrow, like I'm not going out at. I'm going out in the afternoon because it's winter.
Yeah,
Like I kind of when I fish is really dependent on the weather. Like the beginning of the year, I usually go out later in the afternoon because the
mm,
sun has had a chance to heat that water up a little bit more. And I find that the fish get more active later in the day in the early part of the year because the water is really freaking cold and it's still dark
yeah,
long. I mean, I know we just changed the clocks, but that doesn't the sun's not quite out as long as it usually is. But then
yeah.
when you get to like July,
Oh man,
I'm
those
up at the
late
ass
summer
crack of dawn because I don't want to deal with the heat.
those late summer days though are the best. Like you're out
It can
on
be,
Lake
yeah.
Champlain. It's like 8:30 at night and there's still sun. There's like a beautiful
Yeah.
sunset. It's like it is the don't believe me, just watch.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's definitely so it's funny because I'll do both for sure, but I tend to just because I'm a fat man and there's only so much sweat that I can get rid of throughout the day. If I'm gonna fish like in July, August, it's like 4 a.m. to 11 or 4 p.m. to dark.
Well, I'll tell
I
you
don't
that
screw around with that middle range at
this
all.
this summer we'll have to do a trip out of Burlington Bay, that kind of downtown area,
Yep.
and as long as we have our lights, we should plan to stay out till it gets dark and
Yep.
find out how the bite is,
Yeah.
because the
Okay.
only reason I came back is because I didn't have lights that night, and two people instead of one sounds safer. So
Dude, I'm down. Like I said, it's funny because I started out as a kid. I used to do the whole rods in a backpack, ride down and catch bullhead and perch and bluegill and whatever.
nice.
And then I got kind of away from fishing other than a yearly trip to Lake Ontario to go with my parents because they used to do like a 10-day trip when I was in school. Then when I graduated, my parents started doing like my dad ended up buying a bigger boat and he actually up until this year has pretty much gotten a boat slip in Wright's Landing every year.
Nice.
He has a 25-foot fiberglass. So he literally just gets a boat slip, drives up there on the weekend, sleeps in the boat and fishes.
That's awesome.
So that was like the only fishing I did until my parents decided to start doing family camping trips again. And we went to this campground that has a pond in the middle. And if you're from Vermont, you probably know it and don't say it because I'm trying to keep this place a super secret. Literally every site's on the water all the way around. Okay.
Cool.
So you can launch your kayak right from your tent site right into the lake. And we didn't know it. My mom had actually got kayaks that year to exercise. And she convinced my dad by saying, you could get a fishing kayak. Look, they have fishing kayaks. Now, let me tell you, Pelican is the most terrifying fucking fishing kayak on the planet. So my dad got a Pelican and my brother went out on my mom's kayak and he was using just a freaking, I think it was a Senko, and he caught like a 2.5, 3 pound largemouth, which to us was, oh my God, that's a huge fish because we've been catching bluegill all the trip. So then I went out in my dad's kayak and literally it's
Oh yeah. So it sounds
like
like it was a sit-in.
oh, dude, it was like hold on to it. Like I'm honestly, if you want 6-pack abs, I'll find the model, I'll tell you, and take that thing out once a day fishing, and you will be ripped. I guarantee you, because you're
Yeah,
just
you
constantly compensating for this thing. Like,
the first kayak Lake Trout video that I made was exceptionally good conditions, and even then, like totally, yeah, like I look comfortable, but like
it
I'm only
feels like you could
comfortable because
fall
I
in.
have decent balance. But what you're saying is 100% true. It's doable, but it's sketchy.
Yep.
You got to really want
So that's
it.
how I got hooked on bass fishing because I caught one. I was so like
Yeah,
focused on. I think honestly the reason why I caught the fish was because I was so focused on trying to keep the goddamn kayak upright that I didn't even know about technique and I was just throwing a worm and catching fish. But I got so hooked on it because when you catch
yeah,
a fish in a kayak, it's an entirely different experience. I've been in 17-foot boats. I own an 18-foot bass boat. I've been in 25-foot boats fishing for king salmon. King salmon, 28-pound fish. I have just as much fun catching a 2-pound largemouth out of a kayak as I do a 28-pound king because it's the way they pull you, they change your direction, and you're in their element.
yeah. The sled rides. What's up? I would say the only way the sled ride gets better is if you're on a stand-up paddleboard. I
Yeah.
was
Oh,
fishing the Winooski,
boy.
and even like a tiny little smallmouth will still pull the paddleboard around.
Yeah.
Just like having the thing you're on change direction. That's great.
It's literally fun when you hook into a fish and you set that hook and you start going like totally
Yeah,
against your will. You're
I mean,
following that
well,
fish.
we're talking about lake trout. That's another thing. The hook set is definitely really important with them. I personally like to fish with 20-pound braid and anywhere from a 10 to a 12 to a 14-pound leader.
Okay.
I tie I think it's called an Alberto knot. It's kind of a loop and then 7 down and 7 back. And it's small enough that it can go through your guides.
Yep.
But having that, having a little bit of shock for the hook set so you can really give it to them, I
Do you
think is
use a mono for that? Is that what you use for
I,
that?
I actually have used a lot more mono than fluoro. I
Yep.
think fluoro doesn't float, mono does. If I get that correct.
Yeah. So the other thing is, and it's funny because it's funny where the crossover goes. So I do the same thing. I was actually starting to do that before you jumped on the stream, get my poles ready for tomorrow. So anything with a treble hook, braid will bend a treble hook out. it's just there's no stretch. So
Yeah.
a lot of times what you do is you tie, even if it's a small leader, you tie some mono between your braid and your treble hook for the same reason, because you soften the blow
Yep,
when
absolutely.
you
It's
set
like
that hook.
one is like clearness. I actually on one of my reels I have a bright yellow high vis braid on. I
Yep.
find it's actually very helpful for seeing where the line is while I'm fighting the fish. And
Yep.
as long as you have like a 6-8 foot leader on, they're like the aggressive fish do not care and they just want to clobber your bait, which is that's what we're
It's
out there
so
for.
funny to me how the two worlds cross over, because that's what I do. So I have two spinning rods that have high vis braid on them. That's pretty much. I use like green, but that's just
Oh, I think the green looks awesome. I'm a
it's
big
just
green and purple, like neon. That's one of
it
my
has
favorite
no
colors.
it has no reason other than I like
It looks
green.
cool.
Like it's my favorite color, so I use the green. The thing about the
I
yellow
like the
is it
green too, my friend.
the yellow bleaches out to white a lot over
Yeah.
time, I've noticed, whereas the green doesn't seem to do that. Um So basically, I use the same thing. And what's cool about the high vis for bass fishing and sounds like trout fishing too is you can see those subtle hits. So you can see that line pull taut, or you can see it swim sideways, like if they just picked it up and swam with it,
I
but
think
they didn't hit it.
one of the harder takes to detect, and I've had a couple of these. I'm reeling up, I'm bringing the lure up, and
Yep.
then I see that they peel off. So I open the bail and I drop it. And you need to watch the line peeling out. If the line stops, they hit it on the drop, and like
Right.
you're never
Yep.
gonna feel it. You just have to like see and
Yep.
perceive that it's happening. The colored line can definitely help with being able to visually perceive that happening.
It's the same thing I do with like Senko fishing for bass is when you cast it, you leave the bail open, you just let it float out, and you'll see that line. Like it won't even necessarily, like I'm sure like trout do the same thing, is like literally you'll see it, like it'll be here and it'll be floating, and then the current's going this way and it will start, and you're like, that can't float up current, so that must be a fish. And then
Well,
you
with
pull
the
them up.
lake trout, it's like for the vertical jigging that I'm doing, it's 100% watching the fish finder, and either what I see in the fish finder tells me what's going on, or what I don't see because of interference, I'm kind of guessing
Right.
whether the fish is following or not. So
Okay.
there's no like I'm wondering if it's happening. It's like I see them engage, and then as
Gotcha.
I'm reeling up, I see them peel off, so I drop it on them, try to drop it past them, and if they engage again, then at that point I'll start reeling to try to bring them back up. But it's all about making them chase and making sure that they're actively responding to what you're doing, because otherwise they're just swimming away.
So when you're speaking of that, so you said you're fishing like 40, 50, whatever above. Now, are you anchoring down in 50 feet of water? Or are you
No,
riding with the current? You're just kind of
no,
throwing a
and
weight down there and
depending on the wind and drift and like the current, that's when I'm gonna go from like a 1 ounce to a 2 ounce to maybe a 3 or even a 4 ounce.
okay.
And I don't know if I mentioned the vertical tube jig. I got a couple of them here. I can even rig one up for you guys if you want to see. But this is kind of basically this is what it looks like with the tube on the outside, and this is what it looks like underneath. So
Okay.
it's a barrel weight, and it's got two swivels on either side, and then it's got this treble. And I think the way that the hook kind of hides in the skirt makes these like super deadly effective. And also because there's two swivels, the fish can't get the same leverage that it can with the jig, where it's like because the way that it's tied on. So it's yeah,
Right.
this is one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned to your viewers, because I think it's a thing that you can rig yourself pretty easily with the
That's a
right
small
stuff.
that's a smallmouth tube right there. It's the
So
same
anybody who
setup.
wants to make these at home, these are the things that you need to do it. First, you need some of these. These are trolling sinkers. They come from anywhere from 3/4 of an ounce to 1, 2, 3, or 4 ounce. The next thing you're going to need are split rings. I like to go at least 20, 25 pound test. I
Okay.
also like the black ones because they look cool. That's purely an
I,
aesthetic choice.
yeah, I like the black ones too.
And then these are just, treble hooks. I've been experimenting with some of the single ones, but
What size trebles do you use for that?
So I mean, this is kind of a good example of like this is kind of oversized on this one. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, I can see
It's
it.
like
Yeah.
this is like a 1 or a 3/4, and it's a pretty big treble. This one's a little bit smaller. This is one of the dressed hooks that I have. So
Yep.
basically, at in the beginning, I was fishing with stuff like this, where this is like a horizontal tube jig. So there's a little weight on this side, and then there's just a hook that comes out. But you can see how the hook. Let's see. There we go. See
Yep.
how the hook is all the way up here, and the tail. It's like the hook is far away, and I think that causes you to miss fish. So this
That's
way,
that one with the hook exposed, the
yeah.
single hook. That's literally, if you look up like a smallmouth tube, that's
Oh yeah.
literally what it is.
So these, but the
Just
one thing I
bigger.
want to say about these is these aren't made to be cast out. These are
Right.
made to be fished
Raw.
up and down.
Yep.
That is purely it. One of the other things that's really great about these is they will let you feel what the bottom surface is. So if you're on a hard rocky bottom, you're gonna feel that. Braid is gonna help you with that sensitivity. If you're on a sandy bottom, not only will you feel it, you also may see some stuff come up on the fish finder. You're going to see some like bubbles and crap, and you're going to start to notice what air bubbles travel in a very linear way. It's like a very straight line in a way that
Yep.
fish don't. So the other nice thing about these big heavy lures is that not only do they drop down fast, but they muck up the bottom and they kind of imitate whatever the bait fish that are down. If they are there doing it,
Yep.
you're going to blend in with them.
What's funny is I know like lake trout will lay on the bottom a lot of the times. They'll lay in the mud, and when you drag that by them, you'll see it. Like you'll see it on your fish finder. You go over an area and you drag, like we used to do it all the time with our downrigger balls. We would actually drop them down. You know, the guy's sitting right there in the fish finder, and they'd be like, "Okay, where are we at? 100 feet. Drop it down. You'll see your downrigger bounce. You drag it for a minute, you bring it up, and then you go back over that area, and all of a sudden you'll start seeing some arches through there because you basically disturb the bottom, and those fish will pop up to see what's going on."
So one thing that I haven't figured out how to add to these yet is any sort of like rattle. I've thought of like trying to add a glass rattle or something in there. But the other thing, there's like the logo on the back there. I'm working on a website to start selling these. And this is kind of like, this is where we started, which is just like a tube on one of these just solid ones.
Yeah.
And they're going to be, so this is one that's painted to look like it's got a little bit of blood spatter. And
Yeah.
I think this is enough to sort of simulate what the tail of the plastic is. So hopefully you buy less plastic. But the other nice thing about these is that I have a couple pictures of the tubes absolutely destroyed. So at some point, the Lakers are going to chew up the tube and they're going to expose whatever's underneath. So what would you rather have the fish see? A gray piece of metal or a red piece of metal?
Right.
I mean, granted, I don't know how much of a benefit it offers, but
What are you using for paint to paint those?
this is like 100% me. Not only do I paint these, I also tie the dress trebles as well.
Gotcha.
So I wish I could plug the website. It's almost done. It's so close.
Now, are you using like acrylic paint, or are you using like, what are you using for? Is it like a dip, or is it?
So I actually I use just rattle can spray paint. So first I base coat them white. I'm starting to experiment with base coating them black as well. And then I use it's an automotive material called KBS. And I've tried using a paintbrush, but I'm also working on an airbrush method to apply it, because one of the things I really want is like a really nice smooth coating, because that also facilitates putting the tube over. That's like, I guess, the only really confusing part of like how do you do the vertical tube jig. So let me open this up and I'll like just kind of show you guys how.
I only ask because I've literally painted crankbaits with nail polish.
Oh yeah, dude, as long as it's like durable coating, for me, I found that the metal ones can get a little funky.
It doesn't work. That's why I was asking. So, the drop shot, I'd use. So here in Vermont, there's some weird laws on lead too. So be aware of that.
Yeah.
But in New Hampshire, apparently you can use lead if it's painted for whatever reason. So I was painting some of my drop shot like weights, which is basically a mini like 1/8 ounce version of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get them to paint. So I was like, I'm trying to figure out how to make them paint, because I was like, I tried using nail polish and it's like, it just bleeds through. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, so I usually I'll either
Rattlesnake will work.
sand them, or I have a sandblast gun that I got on Amazon. That works
Okay.
good, but this has all been kind of like a figure it out as I go kind of thing.
Yep.
But I mean, I think these gold ones came out really nice.
Yeah, those
These
are
look
cool.
pretty good. I think they're gonna work. If you
For rattles, what I would look into is so bass jigs, they actually come with like swim jigs, for example. They actually come, a lot of them will come with 2 little plastic rattles that have a little hook on the top. And that hook is actually hooks onto the, so there's when you make a bass jig, they have a like an O-ring that you use to put the skirt on, and the O-rings have little ears on them that
interesting.
the rattles clip into, and you can buy all those components. So you might be able to put that O-ring on your weight and then just clip a rattle to it and slide the tube over top,
Yeah. So
and
the
that would
one
give you
thing
the rattle.
I got a tube ready here, so I can actually show it. This is kind of like the hardest part of this. Once you have, you
Yeah.
can just put a treble on the bottom. You don't need a dress treble. I would recommend one if you can get your
Yep.
hands on one. Get the split ring on the top and on the bottom, and then I take the tube and put it upside down. It's important to do this because otherwise some of the tails can get down in the hole, and you're leaving some flash and excitement off the table if you don't get it there. Depending on whether you're out on the water or not, you might have something to lubricate the inside of it. Spit works really good if you don't have anything else.
Yep.
But you just take this and shove it down.
If you're using scent, guys, you can do that too. I know like JJ's and a couple of other companies make scent. You can actually spray the scent in there to use it as lube, and then it gives it that scent too. I've done that with
This
bass
one I've
jigs.
already made a hole at the top. It had one already, so I
Yep.
didn't need to. But sometimes you can use a pair of scissors to clip that. Makes
Yep.
it a little bit easier, and then I'll just kind of try to get the trailer around that. And I mean,
Yep.
we
Yep.
went from a gray piece of metal to a pearl lake trout destroying machine, and
That is cool.
I'm this close to saying I guarantee it'll work, because some days it does, but
Now is it, just out of curiosity, is there specific, I know like bass fishing, I'm sure it's the same thing with trout fishing, but like color, is it white and your browns and greens basically, or is it?
this is what you want right here.
Yep.
Yum, white pearl. It's got a little bit of sparkle in it. This one I think is another brand called Gizzit, and I think this is the camera showing it good here. It's not
Yep.
green or blue. It's like a silver. It's almost like a little bit more of a metallic-y color.
Yep.
But I think you can't go wrong with white or pearl. And
Okay.
then the other ones that I would go on that are either like a high vis chartreuse or a pink.
Okay.
I think those are basically, I almost would say the color doesn't matter. The fish are down in dark water and they're chasing things that are moving really fast. So you just want something that's visible. I haven't had any good luck with like the dark green or black tubes. I'm not saying it won't work, but
it makes sense because it's the same thing with bass fishing. You use white when it's dark water because you can see the contrast. You actually use black, which is weird too to think about, but like when you get that like muddy brown water, you do black because the contrast of the black on the brown stands out.
Yeah, because they're looking up at the sunny sky and they see the black contrast. Yeah, I bet you could catch one on a black tube. I haven't done it yet.
That's
Don't know.
I'm on call for work, so bear with me while this thing goes off.
No worries.
And it's nothing I have to deal with because it's a systems problem. So,
dude,
Jack, if you're watching, there's a pager duty. Yeah, no, that's funny because pretty much everything you've shown me as far as baits go. Now, the other thing I've seen people do a lot is those big, long, like hair, basically like a swim bait head. So it's like a big lead head with like hair. Yeah, bucktails.
Yeah. So I don't have any of those with me right now, but basically you're talking about I'll
It's
take this.
it's basically like a swim, like a
Basically
bass
like
fishing stick.
this, but with a
Yeah,
big hair thing
big
coming off
hair
the back.
long on it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do
those
those work?
absolutely will work. I think those will work in the absence of soft plastics. If you
Okay.
don't have something like you need something that does this.
Yep.
It's got to move around. Ideally, if you, I think another thing that can be a really good tactic to bring them in, even, and this is a situation where you have one rod with like a jig head or something like this. You have another rod with like the biggest, heaviest rip and wrap you got. And you drop that down and you just
Okay.
rip it up and down for a little bit.
Yep.
And then you bring it straight up. And the noise that you brought in with that will attract fish to your other lure. So that's a
Okay.
good thing to do if you're fishing with other people. You know, you got 2 or 3 guys on the boat. Have someone throw something that has a big rattle on it. Like they may bring the fish in for the rest of the boat. There's a similar thing. I jokingly say 50% of the time it works 100% of the time. Drilling holes, like the Lakers are curious. They hear the noise, they hear the commotion, they come over to check it out. It doesn't always work, but I tell you what, a lot of times I drill a hole, I drop down, and that first drop, like the fish are there until I scare them away with my bad fishing.
Right. No, that makes sense because that's actually so tomorrow. I mean, I'm obviously targeting bass is my goal, but
Yeah.
I'm also going to be fishing the end of Otter Creek or the Crick as we call it here. And at the mouth of that, there's going to be everything because that's
Yep.
especially because it's raining right now. It got up to about 40 degrees today. So some of the snow melted off the mountain. So the water's going to be coming down through there. It's
Oh
going to
yeah.
push all them bait fish. The current's going to force some bait fish out. And I want to try to catch like multiple species, but I was thinking about like what now that we've talked about everything we've talked about, there's a lot of crossover with baits that we use for bass that are just basically trout's just an upsized version of that same bait, which is funny because we use small bucktail jigs, we use smaller tubes, we use that swim bait setup you're using right there is
Yeah.
basically a freaking swim bait head that you would use for bass fishing.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Like this is gonna catch
drugs and
you
yeah,
a really nice bass for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, bass are going to eat. That's basically a Ned rig, is what that is. So it's like essentially the techniques are very similar. Now, one thing that I've always been told, and I don't really know how true it is and maybe it's just because, like you said, it was their deeper water, but do trout like brighter colors? Like, are they all about the pinks and the flashy colors for like the shallow water trout? Like, because I've noticed
Um,
a lot of like the trout lures that I've seen, like trout spoons, they're always like pink and red and
Yeah,
chartreuse and
I would go
yellow.
back to that like low vis, high, like fast predator twitch reaction. They're like
So they
they
need to
just
see
need to
that
see it
flash.
so they can attack it. And if they're chasing it, they're not really thinking about what it looks like. They're just like, I see it, I want it.
Gotcha.
The
So do
ones
trout, that's another thing. So I've always thought of trout as like lazy, just laying on the bottom and then pop up when they're actually like actively
No,
hunting.
I think of the lake trout like a bunch of drunk teenagers in a stolen car
Okay.
driving it at high speed around a neighborhood hitting garbage cans at night. Like they are
They're
crazy.
just
They're
zipping around.
flying like rah, they're just flying around and like
Okay.
when you're just sitting there jigging, you're watching, there's not much on your fish finder. All of a sudden 3 or 4 of them start like going up and down and like I call that a wolf pack. And like
Okay.
if you see more than one at once, and one starts going for it, they start egging each other on, and that's usually
Yep.
a really good sign.
Again, it's a bass behavior. So when you get schooling, and I think schooling fish in general, I mean,
Yeah,
freaking bluegill do it. Like you drop a night crawler into a pack
yeah.
of bluegill and see what happens. They will like headbutt each other to get to that bait first. Like,
Bluegill are my favorite because they're so angry at the world. They're just the
dude,
meanest little fish. They're like
the
chihuahuas of the water.
dude, rock bass. That is my like those things are the dumbest, most aggressive species of fish on the planet. Like I've caught rock bass that were this big on baits that were this big. And it's like, what were you gonna do when you caught that?
I think
Like you
sometimes
couldn't possibly digest this.
I
Were
think
you just
sometimes
trying to kill
literally
it?
they're just being territorial over their
Yep.
nest. It's like I think it's more of a
Makes
hey, get
sense.
away, and they end up getting caught just because they're defending their territory or whatever.
That makes sense actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so funny because it's like I catch and this is what's weird. This is what's annoying about that tournament series, kind of bringing that back in, is when you're trying to catch these species, you can't. It's the most frustrating
Yeah, man.
conundrum you'll ever run into is like I will catch rock bass every single time I go out because they live in the same areas that regular bass do. When I'm trying to catch a rock bass to enter into the damn tournament, I can't buy a freaking rock bass. And like I was actually on a lake one day where there was trout blowing up on the surface everywhere. I don't know what kind of trout they were, but I know they were trout because there was just bugs and flies and
Oh
everything on the
yeah,
surface.
oh, I love
And it
that.
was just, and they were shamuing
Jumping out of the water. Yep, oh,
every
I've seen that.
most aggravating fishing day of my life. I hadn't caught a bass the whole time I was there, and these things were blowing up left and right. Like every time I would cast, I'd hear splash and look over, and there's a fish jump, there's a fish jump, there's another fish jump. It was so active in this area that the loons and the hawks, dude, it was like you would have thought that there was a crime scene going on. There was
Oh, the
birds,
loons, dude. I love
freaking
the
loons
noises those
coming in.
things make. Those
They
are one of my favorite birds.
like I knew something was happening. It must be like a nightly thing at this place because like the loons just suddenly showed up. Like they were across the lake. I had seen them on the other side of the lake, and one by one, they're all coming into this bay. And I'm like, I wonder what the hell is going. Like, maybe this is where they nest. I don't know. And then like literally about an hour before dark, they're just freaking trout everywhere. And I kept getting hits on little swim baits. And I was just fishing them slow.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're hitting them, but they didn't commit to anything. And then it's like I'm trying so hard. Like I threw out like little MEP spinners, like little inline spinners, thinking maybe I could get them to hit that. I tried literally little hair jigs. I tried everything. And of course, I only have bass lures on me, but I'm still like, I even freaking pulled out night crawlers and threw them on a bobber to
It's
see if
funny
it
you
would
say
work.
that whole like non-committal fish because that's the other thing I tell anybody who wants to go try this vertical jigging for Lakers thing is that it it's a masochist sport for sure.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot of times where the fish come up and just like don't commit, and it's like, what did I do wrong?
Yep.
And I like to tell people that like only the fish that are really active and engaged are actually going to bite your lure. The ones that peel off, they just you did something wrong, but trying to like overanalyze it is just be either be pounding the bottom and down there or be going up and down. Those are kind of the two strategies with the vertical fishing.
That's something that I'm definitely going to. And for those of you who haven't picked up on the hints throughout this video, we're going fishing. Like I'm going with him. He's gonna teach me some stuff. We're gonna rig
Oh
some
yeah, man.
stuff up. Honestly, most of my bass equipment would work if I used a heavy jig rod.
Oh yeah.
It's a bait caster and a heavy jig rod is
Yeah,
trout
and
fishing gear.
so actually this is another cool thing to talk about with lake trout fishing. The spin casting rods, specifically for the vertical jigging, can be a little challenging. Some people have trouble like popping the bail because it's
Yep.
literally rotating and it's in a different position every time. So
Right.
unless you have really good like you can close your eyes, you can do it. I
Yep.
actually find the bait casters could to be a little bit easier because you're just hitting it with your thumb and it drops. And
Yep.
you also have a little bit finer control over that drop with the pressure of your thumb.
Yep.
I just personally, my favorite rod for lake trout fishing is I think it's an 8-foot the Berkeley Emotion rod, and I have a Abu Garcia Revo X. Also left-hand retrieve, right-hand retrieve people. I don't get it. I love my left-hand retrieve, and you can pry it from my cold dead hands.
It sucks, dude. I've talked to a few people like that. You know what sucks about that is you can't buy reels locally. Like here in Vermont,
You
it's
gotta hunt
hard to
for them, but yeah.
find good reels. Like you can get them online, but it's actually insulting. Have you seen any Daiwa stuff? So I love Daiwa reels, right? But if you actually look at the left-hand retrieve, they're all higher speed than the right-hand retrieve of the same model.
Huh.
It's like they think
Well,
left-hand retrieve people are weaker or something. Like
so it's funny you say that because the real if a golden meteorite fell in my yard tomorrow, I would go to Dick's and I would buy myself an Abu Garcia Revo Rocket.
Yep.
It has an especially high gear ratio and it's made for like really fast retrieves. And the
Yep.
reason I say that is because with these vertical tube jigs, you can ultimately a 1 ounce lure, it dives at a certain speed. And really the only thing you can do to change your strategy up is either dive slower or faster, right?
Yep.
So then the limiting factor becomes your reel. Like how fast can you retrieve it? So for me, I think that Revo Rocket could actually be, I don't know how much faster it's going to reel, but for those fish that
That's the
like
difference.
there are times like you literally, the fish that are going to bite, you can't reel too fast. That's
Okay.
another piece of advice for people, is that like once they see that fish peel up a little bit, you don't want to like completely outpace them, but once they start chasing you, just like really give it
Yep.
to them. And yeah, like they
So I bought a 13 Origin. It's an 8 1-to-1.
nice.
So that's actually the same concept with using bass jigs. Is you cast it out on slack line, you let it sink, and when you feel the thunk, you have to pick up the slack to be able to set the hook. It's kind of vertical jigging. You do have tight line, but you have to do the whole to get them up. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's really another thing with the vertical jigging is it's important for you to like, and I think the colored line helps with this, to make sure you're actually fishing vertical, because at
right.
times in the kayak the lure is like horizontally not under you, and
It's
because of that
down.
you
Yeah.
literally can't see your lure on the fish finder. It is
Yep.
absolutely essential that you can still see your lure when you're doing this strategy, because if you can't see the lure, you can't see the fish that are directly underneath it. So even if you're seeing a fish, if you can't see your lure, the fish can't see your lure because it's not in the same spot.
Right. Right. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, we're going on an hour here. I think some people are probably falling asleep on us, but we're definitely gonna have you back on again.
Nice, man. Thanks.
One thing I definitely want to do is I definitely want to try to do at least a couple meetups. My goal, honestly, is I'm gonna take you out and get you on some bass, get you on some bigger
I'm
bass,
down. Oh, so
and
if we're getting close to the end of the stream, I don't know how many people we got on, but anybody sends an email to matt@vt2u.com, you can claim one of these stickers.
awesome.
Forgot to
Absolutely.
mention that earlier, but
Yeah. No, my plan is I'm gonna put that down in the show notes. Send me actually any of the details if you want. What I can also do is once your website's finalized, send me the URL, and once it's live, I can update this show with the website address too. So
oh
that way,
yeah,
people that are watching
I
have to
hesitate to give the URL because it's just a landing page, but it's
fun.
verticaltubejig.com. Really
Okay,
hard to remember.
gotcha. Cool. Yeah, no, I can put it in the show notes, and then that way anybody, because I leave these up on my channel, and
Yes,
also
sir.
for those of you that are listening on Spotify, because yes, I port this to Spotify too because I'm ridiculous. I'll put it in the show notes on there as well. But yeah, no, we're definitely going to be doing some collaboration. I want to try to get you on some largemouth, smallmouth,
Oh yeah, man.
and you're definitely gonna, like I said, it's probably going to be honestly so every other month. So May, July, and I think August is when the jigs and bakes, because they do every other month. I need to get a trout
Oh yeah, we'll
every
get
one
you
of
one.
those months. So my plan is to meet up with you one of those weekends and
Oh yeah,
say,
I'm down. I don't know if I'm gonna enter myself, but I'll help you. I'll help you in your journey.
absolutely. Because the thing is there's a guy on that series that catches like trout like crazy. And I want to, because to be honest, the Lakers in Vermont would beat most of the trout that they put up on there because they're mostly like
Vermont
15, 16
Lake
inches. We get
Champlain
big ones.
definitely has bigger fish than Winnipesaukee, and I think next to Fort Peck and some of those other fisheries, Champlain is one of the best places to catch these fish.
Right.
They're good numbers and they're good size too, and
Right.
they're just world class. I enjoy bass fishing. It's fun, but man, give me a big lake trout any day of the week.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, we're definitely going to do some collaboration, guys. So be very, very diligent at watching for that. We're going to put videos out. We may do another live stream at some point. So I just want to put that out there. But for now, we're going to end the stream. We're going to get out of here and start our weekend because I've got a lot of rods to prep for tomorrow.
Yeah,
So
you mean both. After this, I'm gonna go start packing my car, and I'm gonna get up as early as I can and drive north and see if I can find safe
see
ice.
if we can find some safe ice. So,
We'll
but
see.
yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for sticking along with us. And we're going to end the stream right here.